Mr. Brown's Swimming Suprise. If you work at a swimming pool, you should probably be able to swim, right? Well, Mr. Brown, the caretaker at Pumbleton Pool, had never got around to it. Something he instantly regretted when he fell into the pool with a big splash, but more about that in just a bit. We're also going to find a furry surprise in an enormous bowl of cereal. Can you imagine that? The story actually starts with something that wasn't enormous, a very small mouse. He was called Bobby Wigglebum, and Bobby was a brilliant swimmer. He loved nothing more than diving into the cool blue water of the pool and paddling around until his little paws were prune-like. Every night, after everyone had left, Bobby Wiggle would sneak into the pool area and dive in, taking great care to avoid the watchful eyes of the caretaker. As you can imagine, mice weren't welcome at the pool. Unfortunately, his luck was about to run out. So let's find out what happened. Now, I'm not calling Bobby Wiggle daft or anything. Mice are very clever, in fact. But Bobby Wiggle was... how do I say it? Okay, look, I've changed my mind. Bear with me. Bobby Wigglebum was quite daft. He didn't always think things through, and this was going to land him in trouble. Big trouble. He'd carelessly taken a nibble on a bit of cabling because, well, that's what mice do, isn't it? And fortunately, he hadn't electrocuted himself, but it had made the light bulbs flicker. So that got the caretaker scratching his head and investigating. Bobby Wiggle had to scurry into the dark corners of the rafters to hide. Only moments before the caretaker shone his torch right into the dark. Luckily, he didn't spot the little mouse. Eek! That was a close shave. Another time, he found a rather lovely bit of flapjack in the bin. He loved flapjack, and so carried it carefully away to his nest. But Bobby Wiggle wasn't actually that careful, and didn't notice that he left a trail of crumbs behind. The caretaker followed the trail, feeling determined that there must be a mouse. And luckily for Bobby Wiggle, his nest was very well hidden in the cleaning cupboard in the changing rooms under an old mop, and so once there he remained undiscovered. Eek! That was another close shave! The day that Bobby Wiggle's luck ran out was when the pool had to be shut and all the water drained away. A bad thing had happened during the children's swimming lesson. I won't say exactly what it was, but let's just say there was something in the water that really shouldn't be there. No, not a mouse. Something yucky. Yeah. Everyone had to get out, and the pool was shut for some very thorough cleaning. All day he'd watched the pool slowly be refilled and waiting for the engineer to leave, but it was taking ages. He might have been daft, but he knew an engineer would tell the caretaker and his plan would be foiled. Bobby Wiggle was very, very sad about this. He'd never missed a day's swimming, and so he moped around until he came up with what he thought was a brilliant idea. He remembered that Mr. Brown always had a big bowl of chocolate pops for summer at the pool, and he would put so much milk into the bowl that it would almost be brimming over. Bobby thought that a swim in a bowl of chocolatey cereal would be amazing. He loved swimming. And chocolate. Well, what's not to like about that? So he hid in the shadows of the staff room and watched greedily as Mr. Brown filled the bowl, looking for a chance to take a dip. The chance came when Mr. Brown was called away by the supervisor for a moment, and he set the spoon down and left the table. Squeaking happily, Bobby Wiggles dived into the bowl and began to luxuriate in the lovely chocolatey milk. He did forward crawl, and then backstroke, and then some fancy moves known as mouse stroke, and went round and round and round and round in circles in delight, absolute delight, until he surfaced from the water to see a very large face glaring down at him. It was the face of someone who'd just found a mouse swimming in his cereal and was absolutely fuming. Well, you would be, wouldn't you? You couldn't eat your cereal after a mouse had been swishing around in it. He was also amazed. I mean, that mouse could swim. Did you see it? He'd never seen anything like it. Eek! It looked like this time the game was up. Bobby leapt out of the bowl and scurried towards the pool. I knew it! The caretaker exclaimed, grabbing a broom and chasing after the mouse. I've got you now, you little rascal! Bobby squeaked in fright and jumped into the water. It was time for his best, fastest stroke, and he swished across the pool in a flash. The engineer had just left for the day, but Bobby didn't care if he was seen now. He just needed to outrun Mr. Brown. The caretaker was hot on his tails as he ran around to the other side of the pool. But you probably know it's a very bad idea to run around swimming pools, right? Well, Mr. Brown obviously forgot this in his eagerness to catch the mouse. And, yep, you guessed it, he slipped on a patch of wet concrete and fell into the pool with a huge splash. As he floundered around in the water trying to stay afloat, the caretaker realised that he was in too deep, quite literally. He struggled to keep his head above water and called out for help. He was spluttering too much to be heard, and Bobby knew that he had to help, but how? Then he came up with a plan. There were large fire doors at the edge of the pool, which were activated by a button. When the button was pressed, a loud alarm would sound to help people find their escape route. Fortunately, it had never been used in an emergency, but it was tested sometimes, and boy, that alarm was loud. He leapt out of the pool and scurried up to the button, and with all his might jumped and jumped and jumped on it until it clicked down, and the loudest alarm imaginable began to ring out. And in a flash, the lifeguards ran in and quickly jumped in to save Mr. Brown, and just in time. Phew. Bobby was trembling with terror and knew he had to move, but he just couldn't seem to. The lifeguards saw him and shouted, "Mouse!" Uh-oh. Bobby thought that he was about to come to a sticky end. But to his surprise, Mr. Brown, who was shivering and gasping, wrapped in a towel and catching his breath, shook his palm and said, "Leave him. He saved my life." In relief, Bobby scampered off to his nest. After all, a mouse was a tiny thing compared to someone having a serious accident, and he was soon forgotten about. Well, not completely forgotten about. Mr. Brown was so grateful to Bobby that after everyone had gone home, he left a bowl of cereal on the floor in the changing room as a thank you, and crept back to see Bobby furtively dipping his toe in. "It's all right, I won't disturb you," he said quietly. "I'll make a deal with you. As long as you can stay out of sight, you can swim in the pool every night. It's the least I can do." Bobby squeaked happily. After all, chocolate milk was tasty, but the bowl wasn't as big as a pool, and he liked to get his proper lengths in. And so that's what happened. Mr. Brown left Bobby to his secret swimming, and sometimes peeped in to watch the little mouse do his best strokes. And inspired by Bobby, he even decided to take some swimming lessons himself. Maybe he'd join Bobby for a dip one day. Got an idea for a story? Tell us the title at funkidslive.com/storyquest, and we could bring your story to life. For a new story each week, make sure you hit subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode. And we are with Dee Dee, who gave us the idea for Mr. Brown's Swimming Surprise. Dee Dee, tell us, what gave you the idea to have the title?
Well, when I was listening to Story Quest, it said if you want to give us an idea, just head to storyquest.com and send us your idea. And I thought that would be a good idea. And I was just sitting there for ages wondering what it should be. And it was on a Saturday, and I go swimming on Saturday, so what about something about swimming? And they just popped into my head.
When you sent it to us, did you have any idea what the surprise might be?
A mouse.
A mouse? Oh.
A mouse that could swim.
Who was your favourite character in the story? Because there was a few. Who did you like the best?
The mouse. Bobby Wigglebottom.
What a name. I love these amazing names that we give like little creatures like mice. What was it about Bobby that you loved?
That he could swim, because I love swimming as well.
Do you think you're better at swimming than a tiny little mouse?
Maybe.
I should hope so. There was a lot that went on with the pool being drained, then with the milk at the end. What was your favourite moment in the story?
My favourite moment is when Mr. Brown fell in the pool and Bobby saved him by pressing the button.
I love it in these books that we have and these adventures that we write, where like the tiny creatures make the big difference. I love the way that that works out. And I'm thinking about the future. What do you think would happen next? What would happen in the sequel to Mr. Brown's Swimming Surprise?
Maybe Mr. Brown goes on holiday with Bobby, and they go to Hawaii, and they go swimming in the sea, and then Bobby finds a friend who teaches swimming.
Wow! Is the friend a mouse?
Maybe.
Oh, and they could learn to swim in the sea. The only thing I'm wondering, do you think a mouse would do well swimming in the sea? They're quite small. There's a lot of waves and currents.
Yeah, well, there'll probably be a lot of drama, like Bobby gets swept under the waves, and then Mr. Brown jumps in and saves him.
Again. Oh, so it flips around. That's a brilliant plan. And I loved the idea that you gave us. Mr. Brown's Swimming Surprise by Dee Dee. Thank you so much for being there, Dee Dee.
Thank you, bye.
Got an idea for a story? Tell us the title at funkidslive.com/storyquest and we could bring your story to life. For a new story each week, make sure you hit subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode.